Dude, it's the best time of the year for people like us. Stanley Cup playoff time, baby. Let's go.
Yeah, I can't. I'm so excited. We're already one round in. I can't believe we're already one round in.
Right?
Because it's just blown by.
Oh.
And we've had some fantastic moments already.
We've had some great moments, some really fun advancements, teams that nobody expected and everybody expected.
Yep.
And I mean, the gambling part of it just makes it a little bit more fun, doesn't it?
It does. It always does.
And you can do that with our friends at DraftKings Sportsbook. Right now, new customers can make a $5 bet and score $150 in bonus bets right away. What do we got coming up for round two?
Well, I mean, the Panthers are playing the Leafs tonight. So that's actually happening in an hour. The Panthers are plus 170, which is pretty big underdog considering they're coming off a win in game one. But you think about Toronto and not even just this year, but in previous years, they're really good coming off of a loss, especially early in a series.
We just saw that last round.
Yeah. So the Maple Leafs are minus 200. You're gonna have to spend a little bit more money to make some money on that. But I feel pretty confident that if you're looking at the money line, the Maple Leafs should win this game. But if you want to go with, say, over under is 6.5. I think the over is going to hit tonight. That's at minus 140. So they agree with me that the over is probably going to hit.
Our friends out west too.
Friends out west. I mean, Kraken played Dallas. I don't think that Seattle's going to be going back home with a 2-0 series lead. Especially if you have Joe Pavelski playing the way that he's playing right now. He had 4 goals.
That's crazy, man.
You want to think that Dallas is probably going to come out better. Probably disappointed that they didn't, help their goaltender or their 38-year-old center out better in game one. So, and then tomorrow, because this will be releasing tomorrow, the Devils play the Hurricanes. The Devils are minus 105, Hurricanes minus 111, 115. I fully anticipate Schmid will be back in net, and I think the Devils will come home with a victory and tie this thing up 1-1 back to New Jersey.
Well, y'all can help us have some fun as well with DraftKings, and let's get these playoffs going. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Sign up with the code THPN. New customers can make a $5 hockey playoff bet and score $150 in bonus bets instantly. That's code THPN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. And all of our disclaimer stuff is down below as always. Thank you.
You're listening to Jake Jackets. Gear up to fire the cannon and hit the ice with your hosts, Jay Ashdown and Jake Gehringer.
We'll try not to take too much of your time, but we want to welcome everybody. We want to welcome to the show the man, the myth, the insider, Jeff Svoboda from your Columbus Blue Jackets is here with us today. How you doing, Jeffy?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm hanging in there, bud. Jay, I want you to drive the boat on this one. I know we don't have a lot of time with you, Jeff, because you said you got dinner plans, right?
Yes, that is true. So we got time here. We got plenty of time, but
cool.
We'll talk some Jackets here. We're good.
Oh, of course.
I'm excited about that.
I want Jay to steer the boat, but I do want to lead off. How excited are you for our buddy Dmitriy today?
Yeah, excellent news for the Blue Jackets, and something they've been waiting for a long time. And it's tough when you draft a player, and this was 2019 when he got drafted, so it's been 4 years. So you have to wait and you have to wait. But the way that he's played the last couple of years in the KHL, it's very exciting news for the Blue Jackets because it's not hard to figure out that he can slot in immediately and be a player in the NHL. Not exactly sure how high in the lineup he goes or where exactly he falls, but he plays a big, mean, physical game, and he has a little bit of skill. He's essentially a Russian version of Boone Jenner, except maybe a little bigger and a little meaner. So, I mean, who wouldn't sign up for that, right? So very exciting that he's signed with the Blue Jackets. And, I know it's a tough season, but you start thinking about you've added Alexander Texier already. You've added Voronkov already. You're going to get another high draft pick. You're starting to see some improvements to the roster that have already happened. And I think there's going to be a lot more over the coming months. But, before even hitting free agency or the draft, they're off to a pretty good start, I would say.
Yeah, we've been excited for Dmitriy for a long time. Him and Kirill both in particular, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny, watching these guys the last couple of years, and I would agree, I was excited about both of them. But if you look at Voronkov's stats this past year, 18 goals in 54 games, that's pretty much right in line with what Marchenko had scored his last 2 seasons over in Russia. So, Marchenko is, I think, a much more, skill-based offensive player, whereas Voronkov is going to score goals. He'll score a nice goal every once in a while, but he's going to score goals from the net front. He's going to be, tipping in pucks on the power play. Getting to the hard areas and stuff like that. But he put the puck in the net over in Russia. So while his calling card is more of the physical play and Marchenko is more of a skill-based game, their production in Russia was pretty similar. So I think that just goes to show you that, if you're sleeping on Voronkov's offensive potential, maybe you shouldn't do that. And I think Kirill is going to be more of a goal scorer in the NHL just because that's, his skill. But I'm just saying that to show you that Voronkov is a guy that you don't want to sleep on what he brings to the table offensively.
Yeah.
4 assists for Marchie will tell you about that big time, right?
Exactly. Yes.
But yeah, so your digital content with the team, right? That's
Correct.
technically your position. How did you go about that? How did you get there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I started at Ohio State as a journalism major.
There you go, Jay.
Yeah. And this was pre-Twitter and really pre-podcast. I actually also worked for the student radio station at the time, but there really weren't podcasts or Twitter or, when I worked for the student radio station, putting a story on the internet just meant whatever story ran in the paper, someone posted on the website in the morning. So it was a very different world back then than it is now. But I just get this question all the time is like what advice I give to people. And so my story was I was very lucky enough that when I graduated, I got to work for a newspaper called Buckeye Sports Bulletin, which actually is headquartered right across the street from where I live now. So here in Grandview, Ohio, so we're very close to where I started from. And I worked there for 9 years, worked my way up from the lowest staff writer on the totem pole to the editor of the publication, covering Ohio State football, Ohio State hockey, everything along those lines. And then after that, I got a job as a digital editor at the Toledo Blade, the newspaper up in Toledo, Ohio. Did that for 2 years and got promoted to sports editor. So I worked in that for another year. And then the Jackets job was open when Brian Hedger, who now works for the Dispatch, had done the job previously. He was the first Jackets insider, basically. And he left for the newspaper, and I threw my hat in the ring, and I was lucky enough to get the job. And so people always ask what advice I would give. And the 2 things that really worked out for me all along, in addition to, having the drive and the talent and the wherewithal to stick with it, is that I got really lucky timing wise that each time these jobs were open, that there was, it kind of worked out that when I needed a job or when I needed to move on and take that next step in my career, the opportunity was available. And then the other thing is just meeting people and connections you make. Every job I've gotten at this point, the job at Buckeye Sports Bulletin I got because, I was in press boxes as a student doing student radio, student newspaper. So people knew who I was and I was able to get a job. And then the job at the Blade I got was because I knew people that worked there and had crossed paths with me covering Ohio State. And same thing with the Blue Jackets. Someone who really went to bat for me to get that job was Billy Davidge because Billy had known me.
Oh, Billy.
Right. And you can't help but smile thinking about Billy, but he had, big college hockey guy, used to be the coach at Miami. So he knew of, me covering Ohio State back in the day. And I had written a story about him as well. And we had just kind of had that connection to where, he wasn't the only one, but he definitely helped. I just knew enough people. I'm sure when I applied at the Blue Jackets, they probably had 200 people that applied. But I knew enough people to at least get my foot in the door and went from there. So, you got to be good at it. The timing has to work out and, you have to know the right people. And so it's daunting, but at the same time, sometimes it works out and you end up having a really fun career at the end of the day.
I know, and I'm going to let you talk in a second, Jay. I just wanted to get that leading question out of the way. Cause Jay's in journalism. I went to school for film. You're kind of in a mix of both worlds with that. So we're not only for us, but for other people that are doing what we want to do. we want to get as much advice from someone like you as we can.
Yeah. And I would say the more experience you can get, the better. And so the fact that you are doing this right now shows initiative and wherewithal to do that kind of stuff. And so I always tell people not to say no and try to take as many opportunities as they can. First of all, do what you want to do what you love, because if you don't try to be the next whatever, try to be the first whatever. So, talk about what interests you and pursue what interests you, because if it interests you, there's probably a good chance it interests somebody else out there. And if you're just going to follow in somebody else's footsteps, it's going to be hard because they've already done that. So I would say do what you want to do, and just kind of see where it takes you, but also just try to take advantage of as many opportunities as possible. And I hate to see, there's websites and people out there that probably take advantage of people and don't pay and things like that. But and I don't mean to do that, but anytime that you can make connections and meet people and try to throw your hat in the ring and be willing to do something, it's only going to help you. So that's the other pieces of advice I would give as well, because I spent a lot of time student radio, student journalism, and a lot of press boxes that wasn't glamorous and things like that, but I did it because I knew it would help get me where I wanted to go at the end of the day. And I guess I was lucky enough that I was right, but it wasn't just I'm going to show up and write about Ohio State football and make a career out of it. It was I spent a lot of time in hockey press boxes and soccer press boxes, and name the sport, I probably covered it. So you have to put in the dues at the end of the day as well. But don't say no, and take advantage of opportunities and do what you love and see where it goes.
Well, that's how we got to you. We've been a part of the Hockey Pod Network for a couple of months now, and Jeremy and Laura really helped us get to you.
Yeah. And there are people who've done the same thing too. They've shown up at Nationwide Arena for do interviews, and they showed up at Traverse City last year. They were up at the rookie tournament.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot they were there.
Yeah. So, there are people that have kind of, they started their own thing. They ran with it, and, they've gotten to do some pretty cool things. And I hung out with Jeremy quite a bit over in Finland when he made the trip over for the Global Series.
Right. I forgot he was there.
Yeah. So it just goes to show that if you show up and you put the work in and you do what you love, it might work out for you along the way.
Absolutely. Jay, go on, bud. It's your show.
First question that I want to ask, and I want to do this for probably people who are more casual Blue Jackets fans, because when the team ended up getting Johnny Gaudreau this past off season tickets just skyrocketed, and attendance went up. There was a buzz around the city about this guy, and despite being a team that finished second last in the NHL, the fan support really stuck around this season. So if you're new getting into hockey, my question to you would be, why should I stick around this team after the team had such a bad year? What should I look forward to in the next year, 2 years?
Yeah, and I totally understand that question, and it obviously was not the year anyone wanted to have.
No, we had a time. Did we?
Yeah, and the thing though is I kind of had a bad feeling going into last year, and I wrote this on the website when I did my 33 thoughts at the end of the season, because in 2021-22 they had exceeded expectations, and everybody wants to think that it's a straight curve, like you get better every year and you just kind of follow a straight path, and it just doesn't work that way in sports. Sometimes you're better than what people expect, sometimes you're worse, and I think you learn from both of those things. And I just had a feeling that it was going to balance out a bit, that everything that went well, and they had so many comeback wins and close wins and things like that 2 seasons ago, 21-22, that I kind of felt like the luck was not going to be on their side last year. And then I didn't see 563 man games lost to injury coming, but I think it's very fair to say that luck was not on their side this past year. So it was a tough season. I think every once in a while you got to get, as Woody Hayes would say, and you get your soul cleansed by getting your butt kicked or things like that. But I think sometimes you have to go through that. Sometimes you have to take a step backward to go 2 steps forward. And so I think there was a lot to be learned from this past year. I think they're going to learn a lot from it and put those lessons into action going forward. You want to talk about, why should you be positive and why should you think that this is on the right track? Well, I just mentioned 2 guys we've already signed that were not on the team last year. Voronkov and Texier are going to immediately go into the lineup probably, and not going to be superstars, but they're going to be good NHL players in my opinion. We've already seen it out of Tex, and I think Voronkov is probably proved it over in Russia to the point that you have to feel pretty good about him going into the lineup. And then the youth of the team, and we've had 5 first-round draft picks the last 2 drafts. You know, we've got 2 more in this draft. You know, we saw Kirill Marchenko this year. We saw Ken Johnson this year. You know, you're going to get a difference maker probably at the top of this draft to add to that. You know, I haven't mentioned Cole Sillinger yet, Igor Chinikov, David Juracek, all the young defensemen that are coming, Denton Matejchuk, Stan Svozil. You know, the future is very bright for this team, and it's going to take some time because it always does. But if you look at a team that's built with really good young players, you know, how could you not want to root for, you know, Kirill Marchenko for the next 5 to 10 years? And the same of Ken Johnson and all those other guys I mentioned. It's going to be a tough road at times, I think. And will they be in playoff contention a year from now, 2 years from now? I hope 2 years from now. I hope a year from now. But I mean, I can't foresee the future, but I think that if you look at, you know, the prospect pool that they have, you know, the veterans that they have, you know, the Laine's, the Gaudreaus, the Werenskis. I mean, there's talented players on this team that you can build around and win with now, with the young guys being added to that mix. I think the future is pretty bright. I don't know how quickly it's going to be. And, you know, I hate to just sound Pollyanna-ish because I do work for the organization. But
yeah,
you know, the way
I'm
that
sure
they're building this, you know, they've gotten so many good draft picks over the last, you know, 2-3 years. They've totally replenished the farm system. You know, you've seen, you know, the Athletic in January, I think it was January, had the farm system at 3rd overall in the NHL. There was just a ranking on Twitter that had it number 1 overall. You know, they've got as good a young core as almost anybody in the league. I mean, you know, the Devils are up there, the Sabres are up there. We saw those teams put it to the Jackets at times this year.
Did we ever?
Yeah. Well, those teams are probably a year or 2 ahead of where the Jackets are going. So, you know, if you can follow that, you know, there's no guarantees, but I would say you look at the pool of prospects that they have and the veteran players that they have, there's a lot to like going forward, even though this year did not go the way anybody wanted it to go.
So one of the guys you mentioned was Cole Sillinger. You don't want to freak out about this past season because he's still only 19 years old. But what can this organization do heading into his 3rd year to get him back on track to the player that we saw his rookie year?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, you know, I think his struggles this year almost showed how incredible his first year was, because 18-year-olds who are not drafted 1st overall generally do not go into the NHL lineup, spend the whole season in the league as the youngest player in the league and score 16 goals. I mean, that just doesn't. I mean, Jack Hughes was the number 1 overall pick. And if you're watching the NHL playoffs, Jack Hughes is a dog. I mean, this guy is a stud. And he was 18 years old, and his numbers were basically the same as Cole Sillinger's when Cole Sillinger was a rookie at 18 years old. So, you know, it was just incredibly impressive season for Cole Sillinger that first year. This year, obviously, not the same. And so I think it probably, you know, I talk about taking a step back to take 2 steps forward. I think Cole is going to learn a lot from this because it came pretty easy the first year, and it didn't come easy the second year. And so I think, you know, I don't think he's ever a guy that has shied away from putting in the work. I don't think he's a guy that has really ever been, you know, negative or just thought it was, you know, he was lazy or anything like that. I mean, he's the son of a pro. He knows what it takes. You know, he's had a great
after
attitude.
His dad, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And he's had a great attitude through the whole thing. But at the end of the day, he's going to have to take those lessons that he's learned this past year and put them into use and get better. So I would bet on him doing so because of his pedigree and the success he had early on and things like that. And sometimes when you're young and you just don't get it going at the start of the season, it's hard. It's you know, it's adversity you've never faced before. So, you know, he's gonna have to learn from it. And, you know, again, I can't predict the future and guarantee that he will, but if you looked at, you know, you said, you know, given this pedigree and growing up around the game and everything that we know about Cole Sillinger, I would expect him to learn from it and get better. And so I mean, he'll put in the work in the summer. You know, this year he had a concussion the first day of practice. He had a goal disallowed the first game. Like, it just seemed like, excuse me, it just wasn't his year for whatever reason. I think it'll be better next year. If he struggles at the start of next year, then maybe start asking bigger questions. But I think at the end of the day, this is a guy that's going to be fine.
Now, speaking of Cole in particular, there's a logjam at center again with these guys, with Boone, with whether they get Bedard or Fantilli in this draft. You know, Voronkov's coming in. There's Sean Corrali down there. There's Jack Roslovic still on the roster right now. Where I know that's going to be up to whoever the next coach is going to be, but like, Cole's kind of one of these odd men out.
Yeah, they've got some interesting roster decisions to make, I would say. And Aaron Portzline of The Athletic just wrote that story of what the lineup's going to look like at the forward position this year. And he and I were kind of talking about it before he posted it. And if you look at, whoever's on the team right now, and you add in a Bedard or a Fantilli, you're like, I mean, you've got 17 forwards that you're like, God, where do I put these guys? And the good news is it gives you flexibility. You've got a bunch of guys that can play center. It was Jenner, Roslovic, Corrali, Sillinger for most of the year, but now you're adding Voronkov. Justin Danforth can do it. Alexander Texier can do it. Patrick Laine wants to do it, frankly.
Oh, that's right. I forgot all about that. And I love that he wants to do that. That's so cool.
I do too. I actually love the idea, but so you've got a lot of guys that can go there. And so it's going to be interesting to see. One thing I think people have to sort of understand is that I think these last 2 years were evaluation years. I think they kind of knew there was going to be some struggles because of how young they were and things like that. Gaudreau kind of maybe thought that they could move a little quicker than they had anticipated, but it was a reset. And, they don't want to say rebuild, but if you want to call it a rebuild, you can do that. It was something that, they had to commit to the young guys and go through the learning curve and growing pains of whatever that entails. And so I think, the past 2 years have been evaluation years as to, they brought in a lot of guys, a lot of young players who, they wanted to learn, are these guys part of the future, or are these guys that are, we tried it and we're just not 100% sure. I think that's going to happen at the forward position. I think that's going to happen on the defensive position this offseason. I would not be surprised to see them make a number of trades, trimming the fat a little bit on the roster, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because they've accumulated so many guys who can play, and it's great to have depth. I mean, they actually didn't even have enough depth this year, as crazy as the season worked out. But I think I think they've done some pretty strong evaluations each of the last 2 years, and guys that are not going to be part of the permanent solution here. It wouldn't surprise me if they make some deals and try to start really getting down to where they know the guys they can compete with going forward. So it'll be interesting because if you look at it, I said you've got probably 17 guys forward wise you consider NHL players right now, and that's if you add a Bedard or a Fantilli. But even if you don't, that's 16. So that's still a lot. So yeah, they're gonna have to make some tough decisions, and I have no idea how it's gonna shake out.
Hey, do you know what a dupe session is?
I don't.
I think we're in one right now. There's a lot of things where we're looking at life right now. Everything's so expensive and everybody still has their brand loyalty, right?
Of course.
But nobody wants to pay like $7 for a name brand coffee anymore.
No.
Like, why?
$1.69 at McDonald's.
Exactly. It's the exact same thing that you're paying for. Pretty much the same kind of quality, but you're paying a lot more just for a specific brand.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I don't know. There's a lot that you can get with the same kind of quality and even better quality at lower prices.
I like deals.
I like deals too. And one dupe you definitely shouldn't sleep on, Raycon wireless earbuds. Raycon's premium audio at perfect price point. You can listen to whatever you want when you want without breaking the bank. Usually, like for someone like me, I like listening to music while I'm working all the time, when I'm on walks, things like that. With these cheaper earbuds, they're a lot easier replaceable if you lose them in a workplace like mine.
Yeah.
They're a lot more comfortable. There's a lot of, like we mentioned, the inflation that's going on with everybody right now. Everybody's bills are a little too much.
Yeah.
So you got to get your cheaper options and compare your prices, right? But you want to make sure that everything's quality. And Raycon makes sure of that as well. You don't have to pay an arm and a leg for quality sound. You can get a pair and a spare and still pay less than you would with regular, bigger name brands out there. They know what's going on here. They offer 2-year product protection insurance for just a couple of bucks. Their easy and free return guarantee is great. And there's free domestic shipping.
I like the protection because headphones are definitely something that within 2 years can get lost or damaged or anything like that. So it's a good protection to have.
Yeah, exactly. Free domestic shipping, and I think it says, yeah, flat free international shipping as well. So like a lot cheaper to get them shipped to you, which is always
Yeah.
nice. Thanks, Jeff Bezos. And the best part, the reviews. 50,000, over 50,000 5-star reviews. So like people know what's going on with Raycons.
Wow.
People know what's going on.
It's like a baseball stadium amount of people.
Yeah, like a really fun baseball stadium amount of people. A nice little sellout there. They offer customizable sound profiles. There's the noise isolation that we always love. There's 8 hours of playtime, so you can use them all throughout your shift. If you're like at a desk
Oh, yeah.
job and you just like want to chill out and
There's
listen
nothing
to things.
worse than like you're 3 hours into your shift and your headphones die and you're just like, oh, I still have
Right. Yeah,
that.
especially if you're in a job like mine where you have to have one in after the other, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, the 8 hours of playtime is brilliant. They're water and sweat resistant, which is really cool.
So I sweat a lot.
Fun workout earbuds, right?
I don't work out. That's not why I'm sweating. I'm just a naturally sweaty
Just a
person.
natural sweaty guy, right? And the custom gel tips are nice and comfortable, and you can mix and match them and have fun with that. You can get in on it yourself. All you got to do is go to buyraycon.com/THPN today to score 15% off your Raycon order. That's buyraycon.com/THPN to score 15% off. Buyraycon.com/THPN.
So one thing I'm wondering about a guy that we've talked a lot about, and that's Voronkov. Do you see a scenario where they take the Marchenko route with him a little bit, where the first quarter or third of the season he's in Cleveland before they bring him up, or do you think he's going to be someone who's with the team day one?
I'd say it's tough to tell until you see him here. My gut instinct is he's going to be an NHL player for the most part, if not the entire season. I think his game being a little bit more physical, straight ahead game, probably makes it a little bit of an easier transition to go from the KHL and the bigger ice and the way that game is played to what's happening in North America. Will it be right from day one? I mean, I guess, again, hard to predict the future. I think he's got all the bona fides. I mean, he's been on a championship, essentially championship level team in Russia the past couple of years and been a contributor. He was a top line player on a team that was in the championship series this year. So he's been in the Olympics. He's been in the World Championships. He's been at the World Juniors. He's pretty much proved that he's, a pretty darn good hockey player. So my sense is he probably makes the roster right out of training camp. And if he does go to Cleveland, it would be something that is Marchenko-esque, where he's not there for very long. It's more of just a chance for him to get more reps at learning the style and things like that. But my gut feeling is he's probably with the NHL team for most, if not all, of the season. But I guess you don't know till you see him here. He's literally never been to Columbus, Ohio, so a little bit harder to project than someone like Kirill, who has been around more. But I think his game probably translates a little bit easier because it's a little bit more physical, straight line game than Kirill's. So that would be my guess. But we shall see, I suppose.
Camp will tell.
I want to give you a hypothetical here because we love hypotheticals.
Yeah,
Okay.
we do.
So let's say the Blue Jackets don't get first or second. They're picking third in the draft. So Bedard and Fantilli are gone. If you're the Blue Jackets, do you take Leo Carlson because he's big and he's a center, he's obviously very talented, or do you play long range game a little bit and say Matvei Michkov might be the best player outside of Bedard in the draft?
Yeah, it is a great question because, if you're willing to wait for Michkov, it seems as though you're going to get a guy, people are talking about him as potentially the next Ovechkin. I remember seeing him seeing him in the 2018 or not 2021 U18 tournament where Bedard was in that tournament, and Michkov had 12 goals and Bedard had 7. So you're like, okay, this kid can score. There's no doubt about that. And if you are the Blue Jackets and you look at your contention window to be a Stanley Cup team, is realistically still probably 3 to 4 years down the road, because you're starting to build, you're hoping to make the playoffs, if not this year, the year after. You're starting to learn how to win. No one just shows up and wins the Stanley Cup. Usually you got to go through that process.
Right.
And so you're sitting here and saying, okay, our realistic window is 2-3 years down the road, and then you can maybe add a piece like that, once all the young defensemen get their feet wet and really start building and things like that. And, Marchenko and Johnson and Sillinger in their primes and all that kind of stuff. You could convince yourself that, you can wait that long. I guess it really just depends on the evaluation, though. Like for me, I think, it would be a downer to have the kind of season they had and then draft a player that is not going to be here for 3 years. But you can't draft based on feelings. You have to draft based off of what is the best strategic route to get your team where you want to go. And you can make an argument that it's still a pretty good strategic route to bring in a guy like Michkov 3 years down the road, rather than immediately having somebody here. So, I wouldn't throw him out just because of that. It's a tough sell, like, from a PR standpoint, but again, you can't run your organization based off of PR decisions. You run your organization off of, who's the best player in the long run. So, if it's me and I have him evaluated wherever, I like following the prospects. I like the draft, things like this, but I am not a scout by any stretch of the imagination. I can't sit here and watch Michkov and say, I know exactly how he's going to do at the NHL level. I can look at his numbers and what he's done and be like, he sure looks like he's going to be a good player in the NHL. But I leave it up to the scouts. And so, like Leo Carlsson has had an incredible season, the likes of which we haven't seen in a while over in the Swedish Hockey League for a player of his age. Say the same of Michkov, and you could say the same of Will Smith, and also obviously Adam Fantilli and Connor Bedard. So however they slice it, they're going to get an elite player that you can build around. And there's going to be some pluses and minuses with each of them. And that's why they get paid a lot of money to make those decisions, isn't it?
I'm so sorry. I thought when you said if it was me, I thought you meant like as a player.
Yeah. Not quite. I mean, people who see me play, they know that's not the case.
Getting into the team, one of the biggest questions, maybe the biggest question mark, is in net. Elvis coming off of a very, very, very bad year. And then you've got another question mark, a young guy, like 24 years old, and Daniil Tarasov. Is that going to be the tandem next year? Are they looking to maybe bring someone else in to compete? Or are those the two guys?
I mean, they're both on NHL contracts, so you can make the argument those are the two guys. But if I'm Jarmo Kekalainen, which again, I am not, but if I were him, I would bring in a veteran that you feel pretty comfortable can play NHL minutes, just because of the injury factor that we've seen with those guys the last couple of years. And honestly, also the inconsistencies. And that's not to say Daniil Tarasov is an extremely talented young goalie, but he's played so few games in North America and battled health issues that, do you feel comfortable that he's going to be able to give you a full season? We sure hope so, but you can legitimately ask that question. And the same of Elvis coming off a tough season where he's been injured pretty much, consistently throughout his career. Each season he's had something come up throughout the season. So, you can ask yourself that question. Is Elvis ready for a full season of being the number one guy? On top of the fact that you look at the numbers last year and they weren't great. And, that doesn't worry me as much because, Jonas Korpisalo had probably the worst season of his NHL career in 21-22. And, he had some health issues, obviously, but he came back and was a great goaltender this year. So goalies are weird. I can say that because I'm a goalie.
Hey, we got another goalie here.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Exactly. Yeah. But, goalies are weird. You never know how they're going to play from a year-to-year basis. So, I think that, both of those guys are pretty talented, Elvis and Daniil. And you'd expect at least one of them to turn in a pretty good season next year, if not both of them. But at the same time, I just feel like you've got to look at the last 2 years and, the injuries and inconsistencies and say, I'd like to have a little bit of backup here in some way, shape, or form, whether it's a veteran who's fine playing in the AHL, but can play NHL minutes if you have to call him up, or maybe even a guy to push those guys at the NHL level. They've got to make a decision there. But if I'm the Jackets, I'm signing somebody and bringing in some competition for that job just because of what we've seen the last couple of years. And I think those guys can do it, but you've got to protect yourself as well if you're the Jackets, I would say.
Well, Korpisalo obviously is gone, and he's proven now that he can earn himself a number one job somewhere. I don't know if that's maybe making a return to come back. I doubt it. But then there's also like a question of our guy Jack Greaves pushing his way through, maybe as a possibility. So there's options that we know of, but
yeah, I think you want just a veteran guy just from the aspect of someone who's been through it. You know, I really like Jet Greaves, both as a person and as a goalie. And I think he's got an NHL skill set, but he's also a guy that's only 2 years out of the OHL and has not played a ton of professional games as well. So, you know, at the end of the day, I think you want a little bit more of a veteran stabilizing force there somewhere in your organization, whether it be the AHL, NHL level, or ideally someone that can probably play both. That's my read on the situation. But I guess we'll see where it goes.
So obviously this team does not have a head coach currently.
yeah.
We're not going to speculate on specific names, but do you get the sense that this team is going to be looking for maybe a younger guy who has only had, say, one NHL coaching job or hasn't had any experience, or do they want to go with maybe a more seasoned coach, someone who's had several stops in the NHL, has had some success?
I think the latter, and I think the time for experimenting is not right now for the Blue Jackets. You had a guy like Brad Larson who, I mean, you couldn't know more about Brad Larson than what you knew about him. He was in your organization for 11 years before you promoted him to be the head coach of the team, and he had a plan, but he's a first-year coach, and when you're a first-time coach in the NHL level, you can have as much of a plan as you want, but it's hard. You have to learn from it. It's not an easy job. And once you're in that spotlight on a day-to-day basis, it's a learning curve. And I don't think we're in learning curve territory right now. I think they tried it. You know, the results were mixed. They obviously weren't good enough because Brad Larson was fired. And so I don't think that you want to go down that route again with a first-time head coach at this juncture where you're at. I think you look around and say with everything that happened this past year, you want someone who has at least done it before. And has, you know, stood at that front of the room and has some experience at handling the ups and downs of a season and the ups and downs of players and things like that. And I know fans, it's hard to get excited. You know, the word retread gets thrown out there when some names get brought up, and, you know, I understand that, but if you look at it though, I mean, the coaches that are out there are coaches that have won a lot of NHL games. That, you know, there's a number of guys that have had pretty consistent, sustained success at the NHL level. That you can go out and get if you feel like, you know, you want for someone who's going to come in and knows what to do in this role. Those guys are out there and they've been pretty good too. So if it's me, that's the direction I'm going, just because, you know, you tried it. You tried the first time coach thing and it didn't work. And you've got to be really, you know, you got to be really skeptical of that again, just because of the way that it went right now. The way that things, just the vibe I get is, you know, you need someone who's been there before to get this group kind of back on the track it wants to be.
And the carousel is full of that. Like, I'm sorry, Jay. The carousel's got a lot of that with the Boudreaux and all of those names out there. So I guess we'll see. I know they said they're looking internally. And
yeah, I think Pascal Vincent, who has been the associate coach and someone who's, I think, very well respected in the organization, will get an interview and we'll get a look. And who knows if he even still ends up on staff. I mean, I've seen him around the rink the last few, you know, even since Larson was let go. I mean, Pazzy's still coming in and working and, you know, trying to prove that he deserves the job. And I think they respect that. But at the end of the day, the coach you hire is going to hire his assistants probably. So we'll see where it goes. But I just, like I say, I just feel like the time for, well, we think this guy can do it, but we don't know. I think they tried that and it didn't work, and it's time to go a different direction.
Right. So last time that they were kind of in a similar spot to this, they turned to John Tortorella, who is a bit of a harder coach, but someone who created a lot of order with the team, you know, kind of tidied things up a bit. Is that perhaps the type of coach that they might look for, or do they still want to get maybe a more of a player's coach, like Jake just mentioned, Bruce Boudreaux, who is, you know, one of the ultimate guys with that. Guys love playing for him. Is that what direction do you think they go with in terms of type of coach?
Yeah. Well, it's funny in hockey. It seems like, I always say coaches get hired to get fired because it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it seems like that you just go from one pendulum to the other. Usually you go from the hard ass to the player's coach back to the hard ass. I think that's kind of the way these things usually work. And, I don't have to tell you which one of those John Tortorella was. So, and when you listen to the players speak at the end of the season, I mean, the word they used all the time was culture. And they all said they need to look in the mirror, and then they probably tolerated and let things slide that they didn't, that the winning teams don't do. And so that sounds as though the players are saying, we let this get away from us. We need someone who's going to be a little bit more on task, I guess you could say. So my guess is they probably lean a little bit more toward the old school approach than a player's coach approach. But I don't know. There's some guys who can probably do both. I mean, Bruce Boudreau is very well liked by his team, but I also think that Bruce Boudreau probably, he's probably pretty good at establishing a culture because his teams have won pretty much everywhere he's gone. So at the end of the day, I think the number one thing though is going to be someone who's done it before, because I think they need someone that can stand in front of that room and look around and diagnose pretty quickly what they need to get back on the right track.
So what you're saying is we're swinging back towards hard ass.
Yes, generally I would say that's how these things go. So we will see.
So you mentioned we talked earlier about Patrick Laine and how he tried his hand at center, and you mentioned Jack Hughes earlier in the podcast and how he's been dominating. Jack Hughes is actually statistically one of the worst face-off percentage guys in the National Hockey League. Is there any chance the Blue Jackets say, we have a guy here, 6'4", 6'5", who really balanced his game out? He got better defensively. He was a little bit more of a playmaker. Is there any chance they put that guy at center and say, we're not concerned about the face-off percentage. We want a guy who can create with Gaudreau and find another winger for those two?
Yeah, I think if you score 99 points as a center, you can have whatever face-off percentage you want at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think so.
There's only about 5 face-offs a game that matter. So, at the end of the day, I know people say face-off percentage, winning percentage has no correlation to winning generally. Teams that win games don't generally have to have high face-off percentages. But I tell you what, teams that win games win that face-off at the start of a power play in the offensive zone a lot of the time, or they win that face-off when you're up 1-1 and you got that defensive zone draw and the other team's pulled its goalie. The face-off the Blue Jackets never ever win.
Oh God!
Winning teams win that face-off. They may lose 20 neutral zone face-offs in a game, but they win that face-off.
You've seen Patrick Bergeron do that 85% of the time in his career.
Yeah, exactly. So face-offs are a little bit overrated, I would say. But yeah, I'm curious to see where that goes. I mean, Patty made very clear on exit interview day that he wants to play center. And they don't have a head coach right now, so it's who knows where it's going to go. But I can see certain things in his game that would make him a very good center. I think it makes him more engaged. I think it puts him sometimes in a better position to succeed and skate with the puck more. The coaching staff always maintained that, I think sometimes he looks a bit lazy and he gets discouraged too. I mean, his body language is not always great. But it's not an effort thing with him.
That's Patrick. That's just Patrick. Yeah.
It is just Patrick. Yeah. So I think you can convince yourself that it makes him skate. It puts him in a little bit deeper positions in the defensive zone where he tends to float anyway. And then maybe it also makes him a more dynamic offensive player. So, who knows what will happen there, but I was sufficiently intrigued after seeing it. I think what was it, 1 or 2 games that he did it at the I think it was 2 that he did it before he got hurt at the end of the year. I'd be curious to keep it going and see. But again, with them not having a head coach right now, it's hard to tell what direction it's going to go. But I also think an engaged Patrick Laine is a better Patrick Laine. And if
yes, absolutely.
If this is something he wants to do, then you might have to look into it and see how it goes. But I could see how it would work out for him as they go. So I guess we'll find out.
Okay, so I know we're probably running a little long on time for you. I'm sorry. So
I do talk a lot.
You have been wonderful.
Yeah, you have.
Don't worry about it. And well, it's because we know you have to go too. So what I want to do is, Jay, if you want to get one more big question in, and then if you can drop us some industry secrets, I don't know if you really can. And then you can plug off all your socials and have yourself a night.
All right.
All right.
Jay?
So
Go.
perfect timing. I only had one question left.
Perfect.
There we go.
So obviously the right side for this team moving forward, you've got Corson Coleman's, you've got David Yurachek. They locked in Andrew Peak, but two guys I wanted to talk about, both undrafted guys that are very interesting. I think they're both 24. Marcus Bjork and Nick Blankenberg.
Two guys we loved this year.
Yeah. Where do these two guys fit into the mold in the future? I think we've seen enough from them this past season to at least have intrigue for this upcoming season.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Blankenberg, I think, has proven he's an NHL player and can be an NHL impact player in a lot of ways. And we all know what the biggest thing for him has been to this point. It's been staying healthy. So that's going to be something that, and it's not like he was someone who was missing a lot of time previously in his career. I mean, he played big boy hockey at the University of Michigan for 4 years and got through that, healthy. So, is it just bad luck, or does he have to change his game a little bit for the NHL? I think that question is still unanswered. But that's the big thing he's got to figure out, is staying healthy, because when he's healthy, he's pretty much a lineup mainstay at this point, or at the very least hard to get out of the lineup because of the way he plays the game and, the way he kind of inspires people, out there on the ice. And so, I think the future is still pretty bright for Nick Blankenberg. And I guess with Marcus Bjork, the question is he going to re-sign here? Because I think it was a 1-year deal for him coming over.
2, I thought.
It was a 1-year deal, but
Was it just the one?
Restricted free agent?
Yes, he's an RFA.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, he's an RFA. And I mean, I think they really were impressed by Marcus Bjork as the season went on. Yeah, RFA upcoming here with arbitration eligible. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so there you go. So, a guy that, if you'd have said before the season he was going to play the number of games he played, I think people would have been pretty surprised. But a guy that took advantage of those opportunities and proved that he can be an NHL player. The thing for the Blue Jackets is that they've, played a lot of defensemen this year. And, again, when I talk about trimming the fat a little bit from the roster, I mean, which of these guys are you going to keep and build around, and which guys are you not, just because of numbers? I like Marcus's game when he played here. But, they've got a lot of young guys coming up. How much do you invest in a guy like Marcus Bjork when you've got to eventually, not terribly far down the road, get the Kuhlmans and the Yuracheks in the lineup? So it'll be interesting to how that all unfolds, but you have to give him all the credit in the world, because coming into this year, he and Tim Burney were two guys that, probably
Right, Timmy's up too. Yep.
Yeah. Two guys you would not have expected to play the games that they played, and they stepped in and showed that they can be NHL players. So, they earned all the credit that they get this year for the way they played. And it'll be interesting to see how they slot in now, because they put themselves on the radar, as Brad Larson said, but near the end of his tenure. So we'll see where that goes.
We were extremely, both of us gave so much kudos to both of those guys. We just loved having them around, and if they can keep them both, great. If they can keep one or the other, we'll see. But yeah, the Jackets insider, Jeff Svoboda, everybody, you want to plug yourself and maybe sprinkle in some, I don't know if the org would, I don't know, have fun with it. Let's sign this off.
Yeah, I do not have a ton of secrets at this point, to be honest with you. So, thanks for having me. You can follow along, obviously read my stories at bluejackets.com.
Mm-hmm.
This week we're looking at the top prospects in the draft who might be available based on how the draft lottery goes. And we'll have, I've got all sorts of stuff people ask what I do in the summer. There's plenty to do. So keep your eye on the website. There'll be a lot of good stuff. And then you can also follow along on Twitter, at Jackets Insider, and also on Instagram at Jackets Insider. I started an Instagram near the end of the season. Going to do a lot more with it next year. This year was just kind of get my feet wet through the last 20 games or so, kind of learn what works, what doesn't. But I'm really excited to kind of show some more behind the scenes stuff and what it's like to travel with the team and all that kind of stuff going forward. So I think that'll end up being really fun.
We saw that. That was neat. That was really cool. You're doing a great job.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. So yeah, follow along wherever social media is you may. I'm not on TikTok.
Yeah.
I'm too old to understand what's going on over there. But I do appreciate TikTok. I see funny TikToks all the time. I just cannot see myself getting
I'm not on it either. I'm like just one of the, I don't know. I know I said I'm a film guy. I've just never been like a TikTok guy.
Yeah. Okay.
So maybe one of these days, but what'll end up happening is I will do TikToks through the team account, perhaps one of these.
There you go. There you go.
I don't foresee myself making my own personal one, but Twitter, Instagram, follow me there.
At Jackets Insider for both. Yes.
That's correct. Yes.
Awesome. Jeff, thank you so much, our friend. We would love to have you back on at some point, maybe during the season when you're not too busy, but we know that's probably not possible.
You never know. So yeah, just reach out. No, thanks for having me.
No,
yeah, thank you, sir. And obviously you can follow us, JJ Jackets Pod on Twitter, follow our personal Instagrams and stuff, follow our friends at the Hockey Pod Net, get some Raycons, sign up for DraftKings, have fun like that. And we'll see y'all in a couple of days for a regularly scheduled show. Bye, everybody.
Jake Jackets, a podcast for fifth liners and all puckheads around. Follow the guys on Twitter at Snake Gehringer, GARRINGER, and at By J Ashdown. And subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen. March on.